I signed a proclamation that defends American industry by reimposing aluminum tariffs on Canada. Canada was taking advantage of us, as usual.
We will make sure that in national projects, Canadian steel and aluminum is used. Second, we will build a defense industry in this country that will rely on Canadian steel and aluminum, creating therefore jobs.
America's factories are stalling, forklifts are idle, and half-built trucks sit abandoned. What began as a routine trade dispute is now unraveling the backbone of U.S. industry faster than anyone anticipated. How close are we to the breaking point? Let's break it down in today's video. Note, this video is an independent analysis based on public sources. It does not represent any organization or political stance. We encourage you to think critically and share your thoughts in the comments. Factory lights dim early in Ohio. Forklifts sit idle in Kentucky. In Detroit, pickup trucks wait half-built for parts that never arrive. If the thread snaps, it won't just be aluminum. It will be entire regions losing their backbone and workers finding their skills suddenly worthless. The shockwave hit at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that will be remembered as the day America's industrial confidence cracked. Effective immediately, all aluminum imports from certain sources faced enhanced regulatory review and potential suspension. The announcement from Canada's Ministry of International Trade was diplomatic, but the impact was nuclear. Markets plunged within hours. Aluminum futures on the London Metal Exchange jumped 23% in a single session, the largest spike in over 15 years. At a Toledo automotive parts plant, shift supervisor Maria Santos watched production grind to a halt. "We have maybe 3 days of material left," she said. "After that, we're sending people home." Automotive production took the first hit. GM slowed operations at 4 plants. Ford delayed its next-gen pickup launch. Tesla quietly rationed aluminum for its Cybertruck line. But the crisis went far beyond cars. Boeing's defense division relied on supply chains now severed. Lockheed Martin's missile programs faced delays, and the Pentagon's F-35 production confronted a serious bottleneck. "You can't just flip a switch for aerospace aluminum," warned David Chun, industry analyst. "Certification takes months. Scaling takes years. Supply gaps could last into next year." The ripple effects spread rapidly. Midwest power plants cut consumption as industrial demand fell. Utilities issued quiet warnings to investors. Ohio's Alcoa smelter considered temporary shutdowns, and Texas Century Aluminum laid off second-shift workers. These weren't just layoffs, they were signs of an industrial ecosystem collapsing. Meanwhile, 500 miles north, Ottawa's plan was unfolding. One that would make this crisis a permanent reshuffling of North American industrial power. The deals Quebec secured weren't panic moves. They were years in the making, catching Washington completely flat-footed. At Rio Tinto's Alma facility, plant manager Jean-Luc Mororo watched monitors tracking aluminum rolling off the line. "We're at 98% capacity," he said. 2 years ago, 70% of this would have gone south. Now we're booked solid through 2027. The transformation was staggering. The EU committed to 2.4 million tons of Quebec aluminum annually, a 340% jump. Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries signed a 7-year, $3.2 billion deal. South Korea's POSCO locked in deliveries through 2029. Buyers weren't desperate, they were strategic. Quebec's hydropowered, carbon-neutral aluminum gave it a massive cost and environmental edge. European carbon taxes on high-emission aluminum reached €180 per ton. Quebec smelters emit 85% less than coal-powered U.S. facilities. While U.S. producers faced penalties, Quebec's aluminum entered tariff-free, often at premium prices. Ottawa's strategy extended beyond buyers. The $2.8 billion Port of Quebec expansion allows massive aluminum exports via deep-water berths, automated loading, and direct rail links from smelters to shipping lanes. Our aluminum leaves Quebec and arrives in Hamburg, Osaka, or Busan without crossing another border, said Port Authority Director Claire Bazard. America's industrial heart faces a crisis, while Quebec quietly reshapes the global aluminum landscape. Quebec just rewrote the rules of North American industry, and the fallout is sending shockwaves through the U.S. The strategic impact was staggering. For decades, Canada had depended on U.S. transport networks for its exports, an Achilles heel that was now gone. Quebec wasn't stopping at aluminum. The new infrastructure was designed for lithium from emerging mines, rare earths from expanded operations, and finished goods from the province's growing green tech sector. This is economic sovereignty built with concrete and steel, said political economist Dr. Robert Hayes. They're not just winning today's trade war. They're engineering themselves out of tomorrow's. But as American industrial leaders grasped the scale of the challenge, a more alarming reality emerged. Quebec's moves were just the beginning of a continental realignment that would leave U.S. manufacturers scrambling. The dominoes fell fast. Within 6 weeks of the initial supply disruption, 3 major U.S. aluminum smelters cut production. Century Aluminum's Hawville, Kentucky plant, operational since 1978, went silent for the first time. Missouri's Noranda plant furloughed 800 workers. Alcoa's Tennessee operations dropped to 60% capacity. The excuses sounded hollow. They talk about market conditions and global competition, said furnace operator Jake Morrison. But our customers found suppliers with cheaper power, fewer regulations, and no political games. Suppliers sitting on some of the cleanest, cheapest electricity in the world. North America's economic geography was shifting. Quebec's hydro-powered smelters had energy costs 40% lower than U.S. plants. While American facilities paid 8 cents per kilowatt hour, Quebec locked in 5 cents, hundreds of dollars per ton in production advantage. Downstream industries felt the pain immediately. Automotive suppliers lost international contracts to competitors using cheaper Quebec aluminum. Aerospace manufacturers faced delivery delays non-existent for Canadian-backed rivals. Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit contractors saw projects stall as aluminum materials became scarce and costly. Housing and commercial construction slowed. We're not just losing jobs, warned Lisa Chun from Michigan's Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. We're losing entire industries, the expertise, and specialized skills. Once that moves north, it rarely comes back. The brain drain was visible. Engineers from shuttered U.S. plants received calls from Quebec offering 30% raises and housing perks. At Bombardier in Montreal, hiring manager Sophie Dubois saw resumes from Boeing, Lockheed, and General Dynamics veterans. These weren't just workers. They carried decades of institutional knowledge. Technology transfer accelerated Quebec's lead. U.S. expertise flowed north just as American markets were locked out. And the aluminum crisis was only the opening move in a larger economic chess game. While Washington focused on short-term trade leverage, Ottawa quietly orchestrated a complete industrial realignment, with future targets so critical they could reshape continental power. Inside the Pentagon, briefings revealed the stakes. Aluminum shortages weren't just a civilian problem. They threatened the defense industrial base. Aerospace-grade aluminum, only 3% of total consumption, is essential for fighter jets, missiles, satellites, and naval vessels. Quebec supplied 60% of this specialized material. Substitutes don't exist. Certifications take years. Programs like the F-35 faced delays costing billions. The Navy and Air Force were scrambling for alternatives. Quebec wasn't just cutting off supply, it was redirecting it. NATO allies secured multi-year agreements. Germany's defense ministry signed a €1.8 billion deal with Quebec producers. France's Dole Aviation locked in next-generation fighter aluminum. The UK's BAE Systems secured deliveries through 2030. While we fight political battles over trade, they're building the supply chains that will define military production for the next decade, noted defense analyst Colonel Michael Torres. America thought it controlled its industrial destiny. Quebec proved it didn't. The irony was devastating. Tariffs meant to protect U.S. aluminum production had only strengthened Canada's role as a critical supplier to the Western defense establishment. Ottawa leveraged that position with surgical precision, quietly informing Washington that aluminum exports would continue, but at premium prices. Translation: the U.S. could still buy Canadian aluminum, but at costs far higher than NATO allies paying for long-term partnerships. America's oldest ally was no longer subsidizing its industrial policy. The crisis revealed something deeper. Geographic proximity no longer guaranteed supply security. Quebec wasn't just selling aluminum. It offered energy security, political stability, environmental compliance, and technological expertise all in one package. American producers couldn't compete. As defense contractors reluctantly signed new Canadian agreements, it became clear this wasn't a temporary disruption. It was a permanent recalibration of North American industry. Quebec's strategy went beyond aluminum. While American manufacturers scrambled, the province was building a fully integrated green tech ecosystem. At the Northvolt battery plant in McMasterville, production manager Antoine LeBlanc explained, "Every component, from lithium to aluminum to nickel, comes from within 500 kilometers. Quebec's lithium production rose 240% in 18 months. Battery capacity grew 60% annually, and EV component exports jumped 180% year over year." Its energy infrastructure was equally strategic. The James Bay hydro expansion would add 12,000 megawatts, enough to power the eastern North American green transition. Quebec offered low-cost, carbon-neutral production at massive scale, a combination U.S. manufacturers couldn't match. Tesla, GM, and Ford quietly secured Canadian supply agreements. The competitive landscape had shifted. Proximity to clean energy and integrated supply chains now mattered more than legacy production centers. Quebec didn't stop at batteries or aluminum. Wind turbine and solar panel manufacturing, hydrogen production, and clean aviation technologies were all clustering around the province's expertise and infrastructure. Industrial clusters reinforced one another, creating advantages nearly impossible to replicate. By late 2025, the shift was irreversible. Quebec's aluminum exports to Europe rose 340%, Asia 280%, while shipments to the U.S. fell 65%. Battery production tripled, clean tech employment grew 180%, and foreign investment surged. Meanwhile, American production contracted. Quebec had created a 21st century industrial ecosystem designed to dominate clean energy for decades. The aluminum crisis was no longer just a trade issue. It was a continental power shift. Quebec's success proved that mid-sized regions with coherent strategies could outcompete larger, established centers relying on legacy advantages. Industrial leadership now depended on integrating clean energy, advanced technology, and supply chain resilience, not just market size or political influence. The real question for America isn't aluminum. It's whether it can adapt before the edge slips away. This was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. Digital Garage has so much more in store.